Um, this is not going to take nearly as long as the readings did last week, so I'm just going to do it in one video. And Wyatt, you in particular, you get off fairly easy this week. So your reading is from the book of Ecclesiastes. It is Ecclesiastes 11, 1 through 6. Um, and the book of Ecclesiastes is an interesting book for various reasons, but this particular passage is I occasionally teach. I used to be a futures trader, and I'm still a consultant for trading organizations, and among other things, we help people build risk policies for their company. And every so often, I found myself giving a class on the basics of risk management. And this passage is basically from long before the Greeks in Athens came up with the idea of buying part shares in half a dozen ships instead of owning a whole ship, so that if a ship sank, you didn't lose all your money. Long before they came up with that idea, Solomon in this passage is talking about the importance of having a diversified portfolio in your investments, because you just don't know which of your ideas is going to pay off and actually make money. So it's economic advice, and it's quite sound economic advice. When you're reading it, there's no bad names or anything else in this. The only thing is to just keep in mind that the main point of this passage, as it is in most of Ecclesiastes, is you just don't know. You're just not as smart as you think you are. You can't predict the future. So any one idea that you have might not work. So you need to try a bunch of different things because you just don't know which one of them will work. So the main phrase is you do not know. So whenever you come up to you do not know, you want to emphasize it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you say it more loudly. The best way to emphasize something is to slow down, right? Like I just did. The best way to emphasize something is to slow down, which you do without thinking about it when you're talking. Here, you just need to think about it. So I'm not going to read the whole passage, but it starts off, ship your grain across the sea. After many days, you may receive a return. Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. And then he goes through some more. You get to the end, and he sums it up. Sow your seed in the morning, and at evening let your hands not be idle, for you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. Right? So that's the main point. You don't know what'll work or not. You can't predict the future. So go work your butt off on a bunch of different stuff so that at least some of the things you do will work. So that's that passage, and that should be pretty straightforward. Now, Gavin, you get 1 Corinthians. Now, 1 Corinthians, one of the reasons I didn't want to ask Joanna to read this week is she's already read from 1 Corinthians twice. And 1 Corinthians is a letter in which Paul is angry. The background is Paul had gone to Corinth, which was a very messed up city. But he had gone to Corinth, started the church. He'd had to leave, go do other stuff. And he had sent a letter back to the people in Corinth, expecting them to pay attention to his advice. And instead, they sent him back a letter which seems to have been really obnoxious. Now, we don't have the first letter that Paul sent. We know that he sent one because he says in 1 Corinthians, he says, in my previous letter. So we know that 1 Corinthians is the first one we have. It's at least the second one that he sent. But we don't have the first one. And we don't have their answer there are places where Paul is obviously quoting from their letter back to him, so we know sort of what topics they brought up. But apparently they were really obnoxious, really arrogant, really kind of made it feel like they thought they had this stuff figured out, and that they had advanced a lot further than Paul had in their understanding, and that they were glad he had helped them get started, but they had figured it out, and really they could tell he wasn't that smart and he didn't know as much as they did, is really the impression that you get. Paul was angry, and it wasn't just because they thought he was stupid. It's because they were really impressed with themselves, except they were fighting with each other over everything. There was a guy in the church who was sleeping with his stepmother, and the church hadn't done anything about it. There's all these problems going on. It appears that you had some people who thought that truly holy people would be above the desires of the flesh and would never involve in sexual relations. Even the married ones, whose husband or wife was like, "Hey, what's happening here?" Right? There were apparently other people who felt like the flesh doesn't matter, so you can just sin because it doesn't matter. It's just your body. So they were all messed up. They were all over the place. And so the first 11 or 12 chapters of Corinthians is Paul going through one topic after another of the things that they've messed up on and saying, get yourself straightened up. You're messed up. And this is his very first topic. And this comes right after he said, "Dear Corinthians," right? And his very first thing is, "You guys are idiots. You don't know anything yet. You're still babies," right? And his first evidence that they're still babies and that they are still clueless is that they had apparently divided up into factions, and they were already arguing about which ones were the real Christians and which ones were smart and which ones just had it all wrong. And they had divided themselves up into camps based on teachers. So some of them were, well, I follow Peter, and I follow Apollos. Well, I follow Paul, right? And they were arguing over stuff, and they were fighting with each other in the name of different apostles. So you have to be kind of annoyed when you read this. Now, not over the top. You're not ranting, like Stephen A. Smith or somebody, on ESPN, making an idiot of themselves. But you're annoyed because you're reading on behalf of Paul, and Paul's annoyed. Okay, the questions. When you're asking questions, since there's jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not worldly? Are you not acting like mere humans? For when one says, I follow Paul, right? You need to put a little bit of sarcasm in it. For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not mere human beings? The point is, they were saying, look how smart I am. I follow Apollos. Look how smart I am. I follow Paul. And Paul's saying, you know what you're doing? What you're doing is you're showing just how stupid you are, right? So you're annoyed. You're not screaming at them. You're not swearing at them, but you're annoyed and you're not impressed. So that's. And I think that's plenty. There's not it's a pretty straightforward passage as long as you understand Paul is not pleased that they're fighting over each other and that they're doing it in his name, that there are people who are treating their fellow Christians badly, and they're saying, oh yes, I'm acting like this because Paul is my teacher. And Paul's like, I did not teach you that. Okay? So there's a little bit of an explanation that you do at the beginning. I think I've told you this before. When there's an explanation at the beginning, you can say that even if you want in your own words. then you pause before you say. So in today's reading, Paul is writing to the Corinthians who are fighting among themselves about who was the most important of the apostles. And then you pause. A reading from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, so that they know this is the part that's actually the Bible, right? And I think that should do it. So thank you very much for doing it. Thank you very much for doing this, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Well, I'll see Gavin tonight for the practice. So talk to you guys later.